She was a virgin at 21 and gave herself to a homeless man. I thought he was just a beggar, but he was hiding a secret. The next day, he disappeared and left only a note. Days later, she sees his face on TV. He was a millionaire. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The sun had barely risen when Isabel Muller walked through the door of her small rented room in the city center. With a heavy backpack on her back and a folder of drawings under her arm, she headed toward the bus stop, while her thoughts wandered between the projects she had to deliver that week at the architecture office where she was an intern. Her heels echoed on the ancient pavement as she gazed at the facades of the historic buildings that fascinated her so much. It was her daily ritual, studying every architectural detail, imagining the stories behind every window, every balcony. For a 22-year-old girl who had grown up in a small town, that setting still held a special charm, even after months of living there. That morning, however, something was different. As he passed the abandoned mansion on Acacia Street, his gaze was drawn to an unusual figure. A man was sitting on the steps, absorbed in reading a worn book. His appearance indicated that he lived on the streets, shabby clothes, unshaven, but there was something about his posture that was completely out of character. Isabel instinctively slowed her pace. The man looked up from his book for a brief moment, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't a look of pleading or sadness, like the ones she usually saw in homeless people. It was a deep, serene, and above all, intelligent look. "Letty." "Corbusier," he murmured, slightly raising the book in his hands. "Have you read it?" The young woman stopped, surprised, not only by the unexpected approach, but mainly because she recognized the name of one of the most important architects in history. Had this man been reading about modern architecture? "Yes, it's required reading in college," she replied, still trying to process this surreal situation. Are you interested in architecture?" A discreet smile appeared on the man's face. "Architecture is the ultimate expression of the human soul, materialized in concrete and glass. How could you not be interested?" Isabel checked her watch. She still had a few minutes before her bus would arrive. Driven by a curiosity she couldn't explain, she sat down a few steps above where the man was. "My name is Isabel," she said, surprising herself with that gesture of approach. "It's a pleasure, Isabel," he replied, without offering his own name in return. "You're an architecture student, I gather?" "Yes, last year, and I do an internship at an office nearby." The conversation flowed with disconcerting ease. Within minutes, they were discussing architectural theories, artistic movements, and philosophy. The man demonstrated a deep and articulate knowledge that went far beyond mere casual reading. When Isabel realized she was already late for work, she got up in a hurry, but before leaving, she made an impulsive decision. She took out of her backpack a copy of Saber Vera Architettura by Bruno Zevi, which she had finished reading the night before. "Keep it," he said, holding out the book. "I think you'll like it." The man accepted the book with almost reverential care. "Thank you," he said simply, but his eyes conveyed far more than words could express. On her way to work, Isabel couldn't stop thinking about that unusual encounter. There was something about that man, something she couldn't define, that intrigued her deeply. How could someone living on the streets have so much knowledge? And why had he chosen to live like that? She arrived at the office late for the first time since she had started her internship. Carlo Allen, her co-worker, didn't miss the opportunity to make a harsh comment about her lack of punctuality, but Isabel barely heard him. Her mind was elsewhere, wandering between the pages of architecture books and the mystery of that nameless man. What she didn't know, as she sat at her drawing board that morning, was that this seemingly casual encounter would be just the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. A story that would make her question everything she believed about appearances, prejudices, and most importantly, about the true meaning of success and happiness. In the days that followed, Isabel established a new routine. Every morning, she left home a few minutes early so she could stop at the abandoned mansion. She always brought something, a hot coffee, a fresh loaf of bread from the bakery, and invariably a new book. In return, she received conversations that made her rethink everything she had learned so far. The man, who still did not reveal his name, demonstrated an astonishing knowledge not only of architecture, but of art, history, and philosophy. He spoke several languages and had well-founded opinions on a wide range of subjects. With each passing day, the mystery surrounding him only grew. "Why did you choose to live like this?" she finally worked up the courage to ask on a particularly cold morning. He smiled, that same enigmatic smile that intrigued her so much. "Sometimes, Isabel, we need to strip ourselves of everything we have to discover who we really are." At B. The office, Isabel immersed herself in her projects with even greater dedication. Her ideas, influenced by morning conversations, began to attract attention. She proposed innovative solutions that combined functionality with social concerns. Her latest project, a revitalization of a degraded area in the city center, included living spaces that integrated different social classes. "Where are you getting these ideas from?" Carlo asked provocatively, leaning over his drawing board. "Don't tell me you've been consulting homeless people to come up with your projects." Isabel felt her face heat up. How did he know? Had he followed her? "What if he had?" she said, keeping her composure. "Who better to talk about public spaces than those who actually live in them?" That night, an unexpected storm hit the city. Isabel couldn't sleep, thinking about the man in the mansion. When the thunder started, she couldn't take it anymore. She put on a coat, grabbed an umbrella, and went out. He found him soaking wet, trying to protect himself under the mansion's awning. Without thinking twice, he held out his hand. "Come with me." He hesitated for a moment, but the rain that was falling mercilessly didn't leave him with many options. They walked in silence to Isabel's small apartment. It was the first time she had invited anyone into her space, her refuge. "You can use the bathroom to dry off," she said, handing him a clean towel and some old clothes she had saved from her father. "I'll make some tea." In the small kitchen, as the water boiled, Isabel wondered if she was being reckless. But there was something about this man that inspired confidence, a dignity that transcended his current condition. When he came out of the bathroom, he had changed. Even in the simple clothes she had borrowed, his posture was different. They sat at the kitchen table, their hands wrapped around cups of hot tea as the rain continued to fall outside. "You didn't have to do that," he said, after a long silence. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to do it." They stayed up late, talking about dreams, fears, and expectations. For the first time, he spoke about art not just theoretically, but with personal passion, like someone who had already lived intensely in that world. When sleep began to weigh on her, Isabel improvised. A bed on the sofa. "You can stay until the rain stops," she said, trying to sound casual. He nodded in thanks. Before retiring to her room, Isabel observed him for a moment. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't explain. The next morning, he woke up to the sun streaming through the window. The couch was empty, the borrowed clothes folded neatly on it. On the kitchen table, a note written in elegant handwriting. "Sometimes we have to get lost to find our true path. Thank you for helping me find mine. Now it's up to you to discover who I really am." Isabel reread the note several times, her heart racing. There was no signature, just a small drawing in the corner, a sketch of a building she knew well, the headquarters of one of the country's largest real estate developers. In the days following the mysterious man's disappearance, Isabel immersed herself in a feverish routine of work and research. The sketch left in the note wouldn't leave her mind. It was the headquarters of Vanek Incorporations, one of the largest real estate companies in the country. But what was the connection? During her lunch break, she would sift through old news stories about the company on her tablet. Vanek had an impressive growth story, but what caught her attention were headlines from 2 years ago. Vanek Incorporations heir calls off wedding, disappears. Dante Vanek Jr. abandons real estate empire. The photos in the articles were old and not very clear, but there was something familiar about that young, well-dressed face that graced the business pages. Could it be? His heart raced at the possibility, but his rational mind refused to accept such an extraordinary coincidence. Researching the competition? Carlo's voice startled her. He was standing behind her, watching her screen with barely concealed interest. "It's a college paper," she lied, quickly closing her browser tabs, "on the history of corporate architecture in the city." Carlo leaned across her desk, invading her personal space in a way that made her uncomfortable. "You know, Isabel, you're very talented, but sometimes I wonder if you're wasting your potential at this stage." "Like this?" "Well, I have some contacts at bigger firms, people who might really appreciate your talent." The way he emphasized the last word made Isabel feel even more uncomfortable. "I'm happy where I am, thank you," she replied curtly, beginning to pack her things. "Think about it," he insisted. "Shall we have dinner sometime and talk about it further?" Before Isabel could respond, a commotion took over the office. Marina, the director's secretary, hurried into the common room. "Special meeting in 5 minutes," she announced, her face flushed with excitement. Everyone in the conference room, no exceptions, including the interns. The buzz was immediate. Meetings with interns in attendance were virtually non-existent. Something big was happening. Isabel quickly organized her desk and followed the others into the conference room. She sat discreetly in a corner, trying to make herself invisible while the partners and senior architects took the seats closest to the head of the table. Raphael Meunier, the senior partner, entered the room with his usual stern expression. But there was something different about his posture, a kind of restrained nervousness that Isabel had never seen before. "As you all know," he began, "our office has been going through transformations in recent months. The market is increasingly competitive and we need to adapt." He paused dramatically, looking at each of those present. "That's why I'm pleased to announce that as of today, we have a new strategic partner, a company that will not only invest in our structure, but also bring projects on a scale we never imagined." The door to the room opened again. Isabel felt the air leave her lungs. There, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with a perfectly trimmed beard and a look she knew so well, he stood, the man from the mansion. But now there was no doubt about his identity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Raphael announced, "it is with great pleasure that I introduce our new majority investor, Dante Vanek Jr." The world seemed to spin in slow motion. Isabel watched, transfixed, as Dante greeted each person present, with the same elegance and ease he had demonstrated when discussing Le Corbusier on the steps of the abandoned mansion. When their eyes finally met, it was as if time stood still. For the briefest of moments, she caught a glimpse of the same man who shared her books and her dreams, but as quickly as it came, the moment passed. Dante moved on, greeting the next employee as if she were just another intern. The meeting went on for hours, with Dante presenting his vision for the future of the firm. He spoke passionately about sustainable projects, social housing and urban revitalization, exactly the topics he used to discuss with Isabel in their morning chats. But now, dressed in his Italian suit and speaking with the authority of a billionaire, he seemed like a completely different person. Isabel remained silent, absorbing every word as she tried to reconcile the two versions of this man in her mind. The philosophical homeless man who shared his books and the real estate mogul, how could they be the same person? At the end of the presentation, while everyone was dispersing, she found a simple, unmarked envelope on her desk. Inside was just a card with an address and a time, Aurora Viewpoint, 7 p.m. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Isabel tried to focus on her projects, but her mind kept returning to those mornings in the mansion, to the conversations about architecture, to the tea shared in her small kitchen during the storm. Everything now took on new meaning. "So," Carlo's voice brought her back to reality, "what do you think of our new boss?" There was something in his tone that bothered her, a mix of curiosity and malice that made her instantly defensive. "You seem to have good ideas for the company," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Yes, curious, isn't it? A billionaire who decides out of the blue to invest in a mid-sized office." Carlo moved closer, lowering his voice. "You know what I heard? that he's been completely missing for the last 2 years. No one knows where he's been or what he's been doing during that time. Isabel kept her expression impassive, though her heart was pounding. And why does that matter? Now, Isabel, don't be naive. A man doesn't abandon a billion-dollar empire without reason. There must be something dark in this whole story. At 7 p.m. sharp, Isabel climbed the trail to the Aurora viewpoint. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. At the top, she found Dante sitting on a wooden bench looking out to sea. He was wearing more casual clothes now, jeans and a white shirt, and seemed closer to the man she had once known. "You came," he said, without turning around. "You knew I would come," she replied, sitting down beside him. They were silent for a few minutes, just watching the waves crash below. It was Dante who finally broke the silence. "You must be wondering why I didn't tell you who it was from the beginning." "Actually," Isabel said, "I'm wondering why a billionaire would choose to live as a homeless person." Dante smiled, that same enigmatic smile that intrigued her so much. 2 years ago, I had everything money could buy, a beautiful fiancée, powerful friends, endless parties, until I discovered it was all an illusion. He paused, his gaze lost in the distance. My fiancée. She was only with me for the money. She planned to leave me as soon as she got a significant share of the company's stock. When I found out, I realized I didn't know anything or anyone around me anymore. I didn't know who I was without all those zeros in my bank account. "So you decided to disappear," Isabel added. "I decided to find myself," he corrected. "Living on the streets wasn't an escape, it was a search. I wanted to know who I was when I had nothing. I wanted to understand the city and its people from a perspective that money could never give me." He turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. And then, one morning, a young architecture student stopped to talk to me, not out of pity or interest, but out of genuine intellectual curiosity. She was the first person in a long time who saw me, really saw me, beyond appearances. Isabel felt her cheeks flush. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because you helped me find my way back, not to the person I was before, but to someone better. And now—" He hesitated for a moment. "Now I need your help to turn this experience into something concrete." Dante's proposal was ambitious, to create a division within the company focused exclusively on social housing and urban revitalization projects. It wasn't just about building buildings, but about completely rethinking the way people lived and related to the city. "I want you to lead this project," he said, as they walked along the beach at the foot of the hill. Night had fallen, and the lights of the city twinkled in the distance. Isabel stopped walking, stunned by the proposal. "Me? But I'm just an intern." "An intern who understands more about the true essence of architecture than most professionals I know," Dante replied. "You see beyond the facades, Isabel. You see the people, the stories, the possibilities." Her heart was beating faster, not only because of the professional proposal, but because of his proximity, because of the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke of his plans. It was difficult to maintain professional focus when every word he said seemed loaded with deeper meanings. "And what will others think?" she asked, thinking of Carlo and the other senior architects. "They'll think I got the job for other reasons." Dante frowned, clearly not having considered that aspect. "You're right. We need to do this the right way." Over the next few days, Isabel was assigned a series of challenging projects. Each assignment felt like a test, a chance to prove herself. She worked tirelessly, arriving early and leaving late, developing innovative proposals that combined sustainability with social responsibility. Carlo watched everything with increasing interest. "You've been very busy lately," he commented one day, leaning over her desk. "I wonder if it has something to do with our new boss." "My dedication has to do with my work, Carlo," she replied dryly. "That's all." But it wasn't just that, and she knew it. Each project she developed was a silent conversation with Dante, a continuation of those dialogues that had begun on the stairs of the abandoned mansion. Through her drawings and proposals, she showed that she had truly understood everything he had tried to teach her about architecture and humanity. One afternoon, while working on a particularly challenging project, Isabel received a call that would change everything. It was her mother, Mrs. Helena, and her voice sounded strange on the phone. "Daughter," she said with a fragility Isabel had never heard before, "I need you to come home. The doctors, they found something." The world seemed to slow down. Isabel felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her mother continued talking, but the words seemed distant, as if they were coming from another universe. Tests, treatments, possibilities, everything mixed together in her mind in a whirlwind of worry and fear. When she hung up the phone, she realized she wasn't alone in the room. Dante was standing in the doorway, and his expression made it clear he had heard enough to understand the situation. "Go," he said simply. "Your family needs you, but the projects can wait. Some things are more important." That night, as she packed a small suitcase to return to her hometown, Isabel reflected on how life could change in an instant. Just a few weeks, how her biggest concern was discovering the identity of a mysterious homeless man. Now she faced unexpected, professional challenges and a family crisis that threatened to unravel her carefully constructed world. What she didn't know was that, while she was preparing her trip, Dante was also making plans. Plans that would involve not only her professional future, but also a silent promise he had made to himself that night on the hill, to protect and care for the one who had helped him rediscover his own humanity. The small town where Isabel had grown up seemed smaller now. The narrow streets, the old houses, everything had a different air after her months in the capital, but the embrace of her mother, Senora Helena, remained the same, although now there was a new fragility in her gestures. "You didn't have to come running, daughter," said Mrs. Helena, trying to keep her usual cheerful tone. "The doctors said—" "It's still early days." Isabel watched her mother carefully, noticing the small signs of fatigue that she tried to hide. The teacher, who had always been a source of energy, now needed to sit down more often, her hands trembling slightly as she held the cup of tea. "Of course I had to come," Isabel replied, holding her mother's hands in hers, "and I'll stay as long as necessary." The days became a routine of doctor's appointments and exams. Isabel followed each step, taking detailed notes, researching treatments, looking for the best options. Her architect's mind, accustomed to solving complex problems, was now entirely dedicated to building a path of hope for her mother. At night, alone in her childhood bedroom, she would open her laptop and continue working on the projects in her office. Dante had insisted that she take some time off, but Isabel knew she needed to keep her mind occupied. Besides, these projects had become more than work. They were a way to keep alive the dream that had begun on the steps of an abandoned mansion. It was during one of these working nights that she received an unexpected email. It was from Carlo, with a copy to the entire office management. "Dear, I would like to express my concern about the progress of some crucial projects for our company. With the prolonged absence of certain team members, we risk compromising important deadlines. I suggest an immediate reassessment of assignments and responsibilities. Yours sincerely, Carlo Allen." Isabel felt her blood boil. The message was clearly directed at her, a veiled attempt to undermine her position in the office. Before she could react, another email appeared in her inbox, this time from Dante. "Dear all, I appreciate your concern about the deadlines of our projects. However, I would like to emphasize that one of Vanek Incorporaciones' core values is caring for its employees and their families. Exceptional situations require exceptional understanding. I would like to take this opportunity to inform you that all projects are on schedule, thanks to the excellent remote work that has been carried out. Cordially, Dante Vanek Jr." The wave of gratitude filled Isabel's chest, but along with it came a pang of concern. How long could she count on this protection? And more importantly, how long did she want to count on it? The next morning, while accompanying her mother to another exam session, Isabel had a surprise. In the hospital waiting room, she found none other than Dante Vanek. "What are you doing here?" she asked, astonished. "I came to meet Lady Helena," he replied simply. "After all, I need to know from whom you inherited all this strength." The meeting between Dante and Signora Helena was surprisingly natural. He had a special way of talking to her, a mixture of respect and affection that made the teacher's eyes shine like they hadn't in a long time. During the afternoon coffee they shared in the small kitchen of the house, Isabel watched the interaction between the two with a mixture of emotions that she could not name. Dante told stories of his days on the streets, making Signora Helena laugh with his adventures and reflections. "You know, Mrs. Helena," he said at one point, "your daughter taught me something very important." "And what was it?" asked the teacher, curious. "That sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters, and that true architecture is not just made of concrete and glass, but mainly of compassion and courage." At that moment, looking at her mother and the man who had changed her life in so many different ways, Isabel felt something change inside her. There, in that small kitchen of her childhood, she began to understand that some projects go far beyond plans and elevations. Some projects are about rebuilding lives, reconnecting hearts and redesigning destinies. The days in Isabel's hometown took on a new dynamic after Dante's visit. His presence had left more than just good memories. It had also brought renewed hope. Signora Helena, in particular, seemed to have found extra energy to face her treatments. "That boy," she commented one morning, as Isabel helped her get ready for yet another appointment, "has something special in his eyes, an old sadness that is turning into something beautiful." Isabel smiled, thinking about how her mother always had a gift for seeing beyond appearances. "He's been through a lot, Mom. He had to lose himself to find himself." "How are you, my daughter?" The question took Isabel by surprise. What do you mean?" "Well, you're looking for something too, aren't you? Ever since you left here to study in the capital, I've always felt like you were looking for more than just a profession. You were looking for a purpose." Signora Helena's words touched Isabel's heart deeply. It was true. Her entire journey, architecture school, her internship, even her encounter with Dante, felt like part of a larger quest. That afternoon, while organizing some documents in the makeshift office she had set up in the old study, Isabel received a message from Marina, the office secretary. "Extraordinary meeting tomorrow. Your presence is essential. Dante insists that you participate by video conference." Isabel's heart raced. An extraordinary meeting was never a sign of anything simple, especially after Carlo's latest emails. The next day, at 10 a.m. sharp, Isabel logged onto the video conference. The image that appeared on her screen showed a packed conference room. All the partners were present, as was the main team of architects. Carlo occupied a prominent place near the head of the table, his confident smile immediately making Isabel uncomfortable. Dante entered the room last, carrying a briefcase that immediately caught everyone's attention. His face was serious, but there was a different glint in his eyes, something Isabel recognized from the mornings in the abandoned mansion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I have called everyone here today to announce a significant change in our company. After weeks of analysis and planning, we have decided to create a new division, the Department of Social and Sustainable Architecture." A buzz filled the room. Isabel held her breath. "This department," Dante continued, "will be responsible for developing projects that combine architectural innovation with social responsibility. We don't just want to build buildings, we want to transform lives." Carlo shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "And who will lead this department?" he asked, his tone making it clear that he expected to be the chosen one. "Excellent question," Dante replied. "Over the past few months, we've been receiving some extraordinary proposals from a member of our team. Projects that demonstrate not only technical excellence, but also a deep understanding of human needs." He paused, his eyes meeting Isabel's through the computer screen. "I am therefore pleased to announce that Isabel Muller will be the director of this new department upon her return from her leave." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabel saw Carlo's face transform into a mask of disbelief and anger. Other members of the team looked equally surprised, though some smiled discreetly. But she's just an intern," Carlo protested, his voice shaking with indignation. "That's completely irregular." "Actually," interrupted Raphael Mounier, the majority partner, "Isabel has completed all the credits required for her degree. Her recent projects were evaluated by a special university committee, and she passed with distinction. The diploma will be issued next week." Isabel put her hands over her mouth, trying to contain her surprise. She had submitted her latest work for evaluation, but she hadn't expected such a quick response. Furthermore, Dante continued, the projects she developed during her internship demonstrate a professional maturity that goes far beyond her age or experience. "I have here," he opened the folder he had brought, "detailed analyses of each of her proposals, with technical opinions from independent experts." The meeting continued, with Dante presenting numbers, projections, and detailed plans for the new department. But Isabel could barely concentrate. Her mind was torn between the excitement of the unexpected promotion and the worry about the consequences that decision might bring. After the meeting, the messages started arriving. Colleagues congratulated her, others discreetly questioned her, and even some resumes from professionals interested in the new department. But it was one message in particular that made Isabel freeze, a short, threatening email from Carlo. "Congratulations on the promotion. I guess sleeping on the streets has its advantages after all." The insinuation was clear and cruel. Isabel felt her face burn with anger and shame. How did he know about her conversations with Dante in the mansion? Had he followed her? Before she could fully process what that meant, her phone rang. It was Dante. "Don't let him get to you," he said, without even waiting for her to say hello. "Carlo's been putting together a little dossier on gas. We're already taking care of it. Like you. He's not as discreet as he thinks, and I've learned a lot about people watching during my time on the streets." Isabel sighed, sitting down in the old rocking chair in her mother's room. "Dante, I don't want people to think I got this position for other reasons." "And you didn't," he replied firmly. "Every project of yours, every proposal, every innovative solution, it's all documented and evaluated by independent professionals. You earned it on your own merit." At that moment, Lady Helena entered the room carrying a tray with tea. Her face was flushed, and there was a special sparkle in her eyes. "Daughter," she said, placing the tray on the small table, "I just got a call from Dr. Santos, the latest tests. The results are promising." Isabel jumped up, almost dropping the phone. "What do you mean, Mom?" "The new treatment is working better than expected. He said he's never seen such a positive response." Tears began to roll down Isabel's face. On the phone, Dante remained silent, respecting the moment between mother and daughter. "And you know what else?" Lady Helena continued, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "The doctor mentioned that all the treatment was covered by a new welfare program. Apparently, a private foundation took over all the costs." Isabel turned the phone to her ear. "Dante." "Don't thank me," he interrupted gently. "Consider it an investment in the future. After all, I'm going to need my social projects director in top form." That night, after her mother went to bed, Isabel sat on the porch of her house, watching the stars that shone in the sky of the small town. Her world had changed so much in such a short time, from intern to director, from worried daughter to hopeful daughter, from a young woman searching for her path to a woman beginning, to find her true purpose. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was a photo of the abandoned mansion, sent by Dante with a simple caption, "Sometimes we need to go back to the beginning to find our true destiny." Isabel smiled, understanding the profound meaning of those words. Her first project as a director was already beginning to take shape in her mind, the transformation of that abandoned mansion into a support and training center for homeless people. A place where stories like Dante's could have new chapters, where people could reinvent themselves, where architecture could serve not only to shelter bodies, but to transform lives. Taking out his sketchbook, he began to sketch his first ideas. The lines flowed naturally, as if each stroke was guided not only by his technique, but by all the emotions and experiences he had lived through in the last few months. In his mind, the deteriorated walls of the mansion were already beginning to take on new life, new meanings, new possibilities. And so, under the starry sky of her hometown, amidst the sound of crickets and the scent of flowers in her mother's garden, Isabel began to build not just a project, but a future where love, architecture, and purpose met in perfect harmony. Isabel's return to the capital was unlike anything she could have imagined. With Senora Helena's health showing significant improvements, she was able to return to work with a lighter heart, although the longing still tightened her chest every morning. Her first day as director of the Department of Social and Sustainable Architecture started early. When she arrived at the office, there was no one there yet apart from the security guards and the cleaning staff. She stopped in front of the door to her new office. Seeing her name on the sign still felt surreal. First in, last out. Some habits never change, a familiar voice surprised her. It was Marina, the board secretary, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Old intern habits, Isabel replied, accepting one of the cups with a grateful smile. These aren't just intern habits, Marina said, her experienced eyes conveying wisdom gleaned from years of observing corporate power plays. These are habits of people who really care about what they do. Upon entering her office, Isabel found a folder on the table with the Vanek Incorporações letterhead. Inside were detailed documents about the abandoned mansion, original plans, historical records, feasibility studies. On the last page, a handwritten note. To build the future, we must first understand the past. The mansion is yours. Make it something extraordinary. DV. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the papers. It was real. His entire dream was beginning to materialize. The morning passed in a whirlwind of meetings and presentations. Isabel met her new team, young architects specially selected for sharing her vision of social architecture. To her surprise, some were former colleagues who had always quietly admired her work. It was during lunch that the first real challenge arose. Carlo appeared in his office unannounced, wearing an expression that mixed arrogance and resentment. "Nice room," he said, looking around with disdain. "I imagine the view from here is much better than the one from the mansion's stairs." Isabel maintained her composure, years of self-discipline coming to the fore. "What do you want, Carlo?" "Warning you that not everything is as it seems, dear director. Your Prince Charming may have a more complicated past than you imagine." He tossed a manila envelope onto his desk. Inside were old newspaper clippings about Vanek Incorporações. Most of them talked about grandiose projects and record profits, but one headline in particular caught his eye. Vanek Incorporações involved in dispute over traditional community land. "That's from 5 years ago," Isabel said, keeping her voice steady despite the discomfort she felt. "So what? Do you really think people like Dante Vanek change? That they actually care about social issues?" Carlo leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Or is this all just a big marketing ploy?" Before Isabel could respond, a third voice joined the conversation. "Marketing would be ignoring our past mistakes, not learning from them." Dante stood in the doorway, his face serious but serene. Carlo straightened quickly, his face paling. "That project," Dante continued, entering the room, "was one of the company's biggest mistakes, and it was one of the reasons I questioned everything in my life. We're not here to hide the past, Carlo. We're here to build a different future." The silence that followed was thick with unresolved tensions and unspoken truths. Carlo looked from Dante to Isabel, his expression a mixture of anger and frustration. "This isn't going to stay like this," he muttered, before hurriedly leaving the room. When they were alone, Dante picked up the newspaper clippings Carlo had brought. "I should have told you about this sooner," he said, his voice thick with regret. "About the project?" "About everything. About how my family's company didn't always make the right choices. About how it took me a while to realize there was a different path." Isabel stood up, walking to her living room window. Below her, the city stretched out in a maze of concrete and glass, each building telling a story of choices and consequences. "Do you know what I learned from you those mornings? In the mansion?" she asked without turning around. "That we all have a story, and that what matters is not where we came from, but where we are going." The following weeks were intense. Isabel dove headfirst into the project for the mansion, transforming it into her personal obsession. Every detail was thought out not only in architectural terms, but mainly in terms of its social impact. The Urban Renewal Center, she announced one morning to the entire board, will be more than a shelter. It will be a space for transformation. The slides showed a project that preserved the historic facade of the mansion, but completely reinvented its interior. There would be classrooms, professional workshops, offices for psychological and medical care, as well as a school restaurant that would serve meals to the community. The most important thing, she continued, her voice firm and passionate, is that the entire project will be developed with the active participation of the local community. We don't want to impose solutions. We want to build them together with the people. Raphael Meunier, the majority partner, looked impressed. What about the cost? We already have 3 partner companies interested in participating, replied Dante, who was following the presentation. The project will serve as a model for future socially responsible urban revitalization initiatives. As she was leaving the meeting, Isabel was approached by Marina. Do you have a moment? The secretary asked, her face showing concern. In her office, Marina closed the door before speaking. I need to tell you something. Last night I saw Carlo in the office until late. He was making copies of old company documents. Isabel felt a knot in her stomach. What kind of documents? I'm not sure, but I heard him talking on the phone about a story. Something about exposing Vanek's real story. That night, Isabel couldn't sleep. Marina's words echoed in her mind, mixing with Carlo's veiled threats and the newspaper clippings he had shown her. He decided to do something he hadn't done since he took over as director. He walked to the abandoned mansion. The full moon illuminated the old facade, casting shadows that danced between the columns. I knew I'd find you here. Dante's voice came from the shadows. He was sitting on the same stairs where they usually talked. I needed to think, she replied, sitting down beside him. About Carlo? About everything. About how things can fall apart so easily. Dante was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the moon. Do you know why I chose to live on the streets? He finally asked. It wasn't just because of my ex-fiancée's betrayal. It was because I realized that I had built my entire life on appearances. He took a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. It was an old photo. In it, a younger Dante was posing with executives in front of a construction site. This project, he continued, pointing to the photo, should have been a public housing complex. It ended up becoming a luxury condominium. At the time, I didn't question it. I accepted the justifications about economic viability, about the market. Isabel looked at the photo, feeling the weight of the confession. When Carlo brought me those newspaper clippings, Dante continued, it wasn't a surprise. It was a reminder of who I used to be and who I chose to become. What now? Isabel asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now? Dante smiled, the same smile she had known from mornings of architecture conversations. Now we have the chance to do something different, to build something that really matters. He stood up, holding out his hand to her. Come, I want to show you something. They walked to their car and Dante drove for about 20 minutes, until they reached a remote neighborhood. There, among the old buildings, was a different construction, a newly opened community center. This was my first project after I came back, he explained, built in partnership with the local community, just like you're proposing for the mansion. Isabel observed the building, noticing the details that harmonized perfectly with the surroundings, while at the same time offering something new, something hopeful. That's why I trust you so much, Isabel, Dante said, his voice thick with emotion, because you see architecture as I have learned to see it, a tool for social transformation. There, under the moonlight, between the past represented by the abandoned mansion and the future symbolized by the community center, Isabel felt her heart calm down. Whatever storm Carlo was preparing, she was ready to face it. Because now she knew for sure she wasn't just building buildings, she was building possibilities for change. The morning newspaper headline was like a punch in the gut, heir to Vanek Incorporações, From Playboy to Homeless Man, the story behind the social farce. The report, written by a renowned investigative journalist, featured photos of Dante during his time on the streets, as well as testimonies from former company employees about controversial projects from the past. Isabel held the newspaper in trembling hands as she read it in the taxi on the way to the office. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications. The story had spread quickly across social media. Sources close to the company claim that Vanek Incorporações' recent social shift is nothing more than an elaborate marketing strategy. Read an excerpt from the article. The heir's alleged period as a homeless person was allegedly carefully planned to clean up the company's image after scandals involving controversial expropriations. When she arrived at the office, she found a tense atmosphere. Employees were whispering in the hallways, falling silent when she passed. On her desk, a stack of emails from partners in the mansion project expressed concern about the repercussions of the news. Marina hurried into her office. Isabel, emergency meeting in 5 minutes. All directors and board of directors. The mood in the meeting room was tense. Raphael Munier paced back and forth, visibly distraught. Other board members spoke in low tones, constantly checking their tablets and phones. Dante had not yet arrived. "This is a disaster," exclaimed one of the directors. "The company's shares have already fallen 5% since the market opened." "We need an official statement immediately," said another. "I suggest that Dante be temporarily removed from the presidency until..." "Until what?" Dante's voice interrupted the discussion. He was standing in the doorway, holding a folder under his arm. His face was serene, although his eyes revealed sleepless nights. The silence that followed was deafening. "Until we can control the damage to the company's image," the advisor added, unable to look Dante directly in the eye. "Damage to image." Dante walked to the head of the table, his voice calm but firm. "What damages a company's image more? A CEO who chose to live on the streets to understand the social reality of his city, or a history of decisions that ignored human impact in the name of profit?" He opened the folder he was carrying, spreading documents on the table. "Here is every social project we have developed in the last few months. Real results, lives transformed, communities benefited. This is not marketing. This is real change." Isabel watched the scene with a heavy heart. She could see Carlo across the table, trying to hide a smile of satisfaction. "And there's more," Dante continued. "Here is my personal journal of my time on the streets. Every reflection, every lesson, every person I met, all documented. Not for strategy, but for personal transformation." He turned to Isabel, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "And if anyone doubts the sincerity of this change, ask the person who knew me when I had nothing, who shared his books and his knowledge without knowing who I was, who saw me as a human being when the rest of the world saw only a beggar." The silence in the room took on a new weight. Isabel felt all eyes turned to her. "Dante is telling the truth," her voice came out firmly, surprising herself. "I met him on those stairs without knowing his identity, and I can say the person he is today, the values he defends, are not a sham. They are the result of a journey of self-knowledge and transformation." He stood up and walked to the center of the room. "And if you need proof, come with me. I'll show you every detail of the Urban Renewal Center project, every decision made in conjunction with the community, every solution designed to generate a positive social impact." She picked up her tablet and began to project the project slides. "This," she said, pointing to the images, "is not marketing. This is architecture with purpose. This is building the future." As she presented, Isabel noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the room. Skeptical looks were beginning to give way to expressions of genuine interest. Even some of the more conservative advisors were taking notes and asking pertinent questions. At the end of his presentation, Raphael Munier cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Well, I think we have a decision to make," he said, looking at the other board members. "Do we continue on the path we have chosen, facing this crisis head-on, or do we backtrack?" The board's decision was unanimous. They would stay the course. More than that, they decided to turn the crisis into an opportunity. Dante would hold a press conference to tell his full story without filters or half-truths. In the days that followed, the office became a real headquarters. While the communications team prepared the press conference, Isabel and her team worked tirelessly on the project for the mansion. Every detail had to be perfect. "We need to show that we're not just talking about change," she said during a meeting with her staff. "We're actually making it happen." One afternoon, while reviewing some technical drawings, Isabel received an unexpected visit. It was her mother, Señora Helena, who had made the trip to the capital without warning. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, running to hug her. "I came to see my daughter shine," Lady Helena replied with a smile. "And also, I brought something you need to see." From her purse, she took out a yellowed envelope. Inside was an old photograph, the facade of the mansion in its glory days decades ago. "Do you know what used to be there?" asked Mrs. Helena, her eyes shining. "It was a teacher training center. I myself did my regular course in that building." Isabel took the photo carefully, observing the details of the building in its prime. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because some stories need the right moment to be told," his mother replied wisely, "like yours and Dante's." At that moment, a commotion in the hallway caught the attention of both of them. Marina hurried into the room. "Isabel, you have to see this," she exclaimed, turning on the television on the wall. It was Carlo giving a live interview to a news channel, but something was different about his posture, his tone of voice. "Yes, I was the one who took the story to the press," he admitted. "But after seeing the company's reaction, after witnessing the work that's being done, I realized I made a mistake." Isabel and Señora Helena watched in silence, perplexed. "The Urban Renewal Center project is not marketing," Carlo continued. "Oh, it's real. I've visited the communities involved myself. I've seen the impact it's having, and I owe a public apology to Dante Vanek and Isabel Muller." The broadcast cut to the studio, where the presenters were discussing the surprising twist in the story. Isabel felt her mother's hand squeeze hers. "Sometimes," Lady Helena said softly, "people surprise us in the most unexpected ways." The next morning, the press conference was held in the mansion itself. Journalists and photographers settled in among the ancient walls, while Dante, standing in the exact spot where he usually sat to read, began to tell his story. Isabel watched from the front row, next to her mother. As Dante spoke about his journey of transformation, about how a chance encounter with a young architect had changed his perspective on life, she felt her heart overflow with emotion. At the end of his speech, Dante made an announcement that took everyone by surprise. "This project is not just about transforming an abandoned building. It is about transforming lives. That is why I'm transferring 30% of my shares in Vanek Incorporações to a foundation that will be managed by the local community, ensuring that social projects continue regardless of who is in charge." The room exploded with flashes and questions, but Dante wasn't finished. He walked over to where Isabel was sitting and held out his hand to her. "And now," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I would like to invite the person who taught me that true architecture is not about building walls, but about building bridges between people. Isabel, will you accept being not only the director of this project, but my partner in every sense?" The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of more flashes going off. Isabel looked at her mother, who was smiling with tears in her eyes, and then at Dante, whose gaze conveyed the same sincerity she had known on those mornings. Of conversations about architecture, she stood up, taking his offered hand. "I accept," she said simply, "in every way." The days following the press conference were a whirlwind of emotions and change. Dante and Isabel's story captured the public's imagination, becoming a symbol of social transformation and urban renewal. Newspapers and magazines specializing in architecture competed for interviews, wanting to know more about the innovative project of the Urban Renewal Center. On a particularly busy morning, Isabel arrived at the mansion to oversee the start of the restoration work. The place was different. Scaffolding covered the historic facade, and a team of urban archaeologists were documenting every detail of the original construction. "We found something interesting," said Helena, the lead archaeologist, approaching. with an object wrapped in cloth. It was hidden in a cavity in the main wall. It was an old diary, its pages yellowed with age, telling the story of the mansion's early years as a teacher training center. Isabel leafed through the pages carefully, recognizing in those handwritten words the same spirit of social transformation that they were now seeking to rescue. "Look at this," she pointed out to Dante, who had just arrived. One of the teachers wrote about how the mansion was more than just a building. It was a symbol of hope for young people who dreamed of changing their communities through education. Dante smiled, that same smile she had known on the stairs. "Some places have soul, don't they? Maybe that's why I was drawn here during my days on the streets." The restoration work progressed quickly, but not without its challenges. Every wall revealed a surprise. Every room told a different story. Isabel made sure to document everything, creating a memorial that would be an integral part of the new center. One afternoon, while overseeing the installation of the new frames, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Carlo, looking uncomfortable, in his impeccable suit amid the dust from the construction site. "May I have a word?" he asked, his usual arrogance replaced by something that sounded like genuine regret. They walked to the back garden, where a team of landscapers was beginning to prepare the ground for a community garden. "I wanted to apologize," he began, the words coming out thickly, "not just for the report, but for everything. I was wrong about you, about Dante, about all of this." Isabel watched her old rival for a moment. "What made you change your mind?" "I visited one of the community centers you built," he replied, looking at the plants that were beginning to sprout in the garden. "I saw children taking art classes in dignified spaces, seniors learning about computers, young people discovering architecture. It was as if for the first time I understood what it was all about." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Actually, I came to do more than apologize. I came to offer to help. If you still want to, that is." The proposal took Isabel by surprise. She remained silent for a few moments, thinking about how life had curious ways of turning adversaries into allies. "The Education Wing project still needs a coordinator," she said finally. "Someone who understands both architecture and management." Carlo's face lit up with a genuine smile, something Isabel had never seen before. That night, over dinner in her small kitchen, the same place where she had once sheltered a stranger, during a storm, Isabel told Dante about her conversation with Carlo. "Do you really think he's changed?" Dante asked, pouring more wine into their glasses. "I think we all change," she replied, thinking about her own journey. "Sometimes we just need the right opportunity." Dante took her hand across the table, their fingers intertwining. "Naturally. Do you know what fascinates me most about you? Your ability to see the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. I learned it from a certain homeless man who used to read Le Corbusier on the steps of an abandoned mansion," she joked, making him laugh. The sound of her phone interrupted the moment. It was a message from her mother with a photo attached, the results of her latest tests, all normal. Below, a simple message. "Miracles happen every day, my daughter, some in the form of medicine, others in the form of love." Isabel felt tears of happiness form in her eyes. Dante stood up from his chair, pulling her into a tight hug. "See," he whispered in her ear, "sometimes we have to lose the ground beneath our feet to find wings we didn't even know we had." 6 months passed, and the Urban Renewal Center was about to open. The mansion, once abandoned and forgotten, now shone with new life. Its carefully restored walls told stories of past and future, of loss and new beginnings. On the eve of the opening, Isabel walked the hallways of the building, checking the final details. Every space had been designed with purpose and meaning. The former teacher's lounge was now a professional training center. The main hall had been transformed into a multi-purpose space for community events. The basement, once dark and damp, now housed a modern art studio. Thinking about how it all started, Dante's voice surprised her. He was standing in the doorway of what had once been the staircase where they had met, now a small community cafe that would be run by people in socially vulnerable situations. Thinking about how everything has changed, she replied, taking his hand. And how some things stay exactly the same. He smiled, understanding perfectly what she meant. The love that had been born between architecture books and conversations on the stairs had only grown and strengthened with each challenge faced. They went up together to the terrace, a modern addition to the original design from where they could see the entire city. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. "I have a surprise for you," Dante said, pulling a small book from his jacket pocket. It was an old edition of Le Corbusier, the same book he had been reading when they had first met. Isabel opened the book carefully. Inside was a recent photo of her and Dante on the steps of the mansion, taken during the renovations. Alongside it was a note written in the same elegant handwriting she had recognized that morning after the storm. "To build the future, sometimes we need to go back to the beginning. Will you marry me?" Before she could respond, they heard familiar voices coming to the terrace. It was Mrs. Helena, accompanied by Marina, Carlo, and some residents of the community who had been actively involved in the project. "Sorry to interrupt," Lady Helena said with a knowing smile, "but we thought you might like to see this." On the ground floor, a small crowd had gathered. They were people who had been touched in some way by the project, former students of the Teacher Training Center, homeless people who had found hope in social initiatives, young architects inspired by the story of transformation. "They came to say thank you," Marina explained. "And they also brought something special." One of the neighborhood's oldest residents stepped forward, carrying a large photo board. It documented the mansion's history over the years, its glory days as an educational center, its period of abandonment, and now its rebirth. "This place has always been more than a building," the man said, his voice choked with emotion. "It was a symbol of hope, and you brought that hope back." Isabel felt tears in her eyes as she watched the people gathered below. She turned to Dante, who was still waiting for her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice brimming with love and certainty. "Yes to the wedding, yes to the future, yes to everything we have built and will build together." The next morning, the Urban Renewal Center opened its doors to the city. The opening event was not a formal ceremony, but a true community celebration. People from all walks of life, ages and backgrounds mingled in the halls of the mansion, each finding their own meaning in the space. Carlo, who had devoted himself entirely to the educational wing, led groups of young people around the building, explaining every aspect of the project with genuine enthusiasm. Marina coordinated a team of volunteers who organized cultural activities. Mrs. Helena, fully recovered, talked to former fellow teachers about the new educational programs that were to be implemented. At the end of the day, when most of the visitors had left, Isabel and Dante returned to the staircase where it all began. The sun was setting over the city once again, but this time it illuminated not an abandoned building, but a living symbol of transformation and hope. "Do you know what I learned from all this?" Isabel asked, leaning on Dante's shoulder. "What?" "That true architecture is not about building walls or ceilings. It is about building possibilities. It is about creating spaces where dreams can flourish and lives can be transformed." Dante smiled, gently kissing her forehead. "What about finding love in the most unexpected places?" "Especially about this," she replied, her heart overflowing with gratitude and happiness. The success of the Urban Renewal Center exceeded all expectations. In just 3 months of operation, the project had already become a national reference in social architecture and urban revitalization. Universities from all over the country sent students to learn about the initiative, and international delegations scheduled visits to understand how an abandoned mansion had been transformed into a center of social transformation. One autumn morning, Isabel led another group of architecture students through the corridors of the center. The young people followed her fascinated, absorbing every detail of how the project had maintained the historic essence of the building while adapting it to its new functions. "The key to the project," she explained, pausing in the old main hall, "was understanding that we weren't just restoring a building. We were restoring memories, rebuilding dreams, reconnecting people." Among the students, a young woman raised her hand. "Is it true that you met your fiancé when he was homeless, right on these steps?" Isabel smiled, looking at the place where so many mornings she had shared conversations about architecture with a man who would change her life. Yes, it is true, and it taught us a valuable lesson. Never judge a book by its cover, or a building by its facade. After the visit, while organizing some documents in her office, the old library of the mansion now transformed into a welcoming space that mixed modern elements with the historic structure, Isabel received an unexpected visit. "Mrs. Isabel?" A timid voice called from the doorway. It was Jonas, one of the homeless people who attended the center's vocational training courses. "Can I speak to you for a minute?" "Of course, Jonas, and I already said you can just call me Isabel." The man came in holding an envelope carefully. I did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I got my first job as a kitchen assistant at the school restaurant." Isabel felt her heart warm. The restaurant school had been one of the project's most successful ideas, offering professional training and real job opportunities. "And there's more," Jonas continued, opening the envelope. "With my first salary, I was able to rent a small room. Small but decent. It's the first time in 5 years that I'll have a roof over my head." The tears in Jonas's eyes reflected more than gratitude. They reflected renewed hope, restored dignity. Isabel thought of Dante, how he had experienced life on the streets not out of necessity, but by choice, and how that experience had transformed not only him, but now transformed the lives of so many others. That night, during family dinner, which now included not only Senora Helena, but also Marina, who had become a close friend, Isabel shared Jonas's story. "Do you know what moves me the most?" said Mrs. Helena, her eyes shining with the renewed vigor of someone who had won a difficult battle. "Seeing how everything is connected, this mansion, which once trained teachers like me, now continues to train people, only in a different way. And to think that it all started with some architecture books and conversations on the stairs," commented Marina, smiling. Dante, who had arrived silently during the conversation, approached the table. "Actually," he said, "it started much earlier. It started with a young architect who had the courage to see beyond appearances, to believe that transformation is possible." He took a small folded project out of his pocket. It was the preliminary drawings for the expansion of the center. "The mayor approved our proposal. We will be able to buy the neighboring land and expand the project. More classrooms, more workshops, more opportunities." Isabel took the drawings, her eyes tracing the lines with professional expertise, but her heart beating with personal emotion. Each line represented not just a physical space, but a possibility for change in someone's life. "And there's one more thing," Dante continued, a mysterious smile on his lips. "Remember that spot on the hill where I first revealed myself to you?" "How could I forget?" "I bought it, and I want you to design our house there. A house that is more than a home. A symbol that sometimes we need to get lost to find our true." Mrs. Helena discreetly wiped away a tear, while Marina applauded enthusiastically. Isabel, in turn, felt her heart overflow with love and gratitude. "On one condition," she replied, taking Dante's hand, "that the house have a large library with a view of the center, so that we never forget where our story began. And a generous balcony," he added, "so we can watch the sun rise every morning, just like those days when we used to chat on the steps." Spring had arrived, bringing new beginnings. Isabel and Dante's wedding would be held in the garden of the Urban Renewal Center, a choice that perfectly reflected the couple's history. The flowers that now covered the old abandoned courtyard created the perfect backdrop for the celebration. On the morning of the ceremony, Isabel watched as her new office at the center was being prepared. Her old office had been moved to the expanded wing of the project. The space was filled with drawing boards depicting what would be her next major project, the network of renewal centers that would begin to be implemented in other cities. "Nervous?" asked Mrs. Helena, entering the room with an arrangement of wild flowers, the same ones that used to sprout between the cracks of the abandoned mansion. "Oddly enough, no," Isabel replied, adjusting the simple but elegant dress she had chosen. "I feel as if every step I have taken in life has led me to this moment." Marina hurried in, carrying an ancient box. Look what the archaeologist found during the expansion, she exclaimed, carefully opening the box. Inside was a set of black and white photographs showing the mansion at different times. In one of them, a group of young teachers posed on the staircase, the same place where years later Isabel would find a man reading Le Corbusier. "Wait a moment," said Lady Helena, taking the photo with slightly shaking hands. "This one. This is my mother." Isabel and Marina came closer to get a better look. In the photo, a young woman who looked very similar to Mrs. Helena was smiling at the camera, holding a book close to her chest. "Did your grandmother study here?" Marina asked, surprised. "Yes, and it was here that she met my father," replied Lady Helena, her eyes brimming with tears. "He was the gardener's son. She always said it was love at first sight among the books and the flowers in the garden." Isabel felt a shiver run down her spine. Life's coincidences sometimes seemed like small miracles, carefully orchestrated by fate. The ceremony was simple and moving. The guests were not only family and friends, but also people whose lives had been touched by the center's project. Jonas, now assistant chef at the school restaurant, had personally prepared the buffet. Carlo, who had become a dedicated education coordinator, organized a special presentation with the students from the vocational courses. When Dante saw Isabel descending the historic staircase, now restored and filled with flowers, his eyes sparkled with the same wonder as those first mornings of talking about architecture. She was carrying not a traditional bouquet but an old book by Le Corbusier, decorated with wildflowers. During the exchange of vows, a particularly touching moment surprised everyone. A group of former homeless people who had found new life, through the center's programs, performed a song composed especially for the couple. The lyrics spoke of transformation, hope, and how love can blossom in the most unexpected places. Raphael Munier, who presided over the ceremony, gave an emotional speech. "Today we are not just celebrating the union of two extraordinary people. We are celebrating living proof that transformation is possible, that a chance encounter can change not just two lives, but an entire community." After the ceremony, while the guests celebrated in the garden, Isabel and Dante went up to the terrace, their special place. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with the same colors as that afternoon when he had revealed his true identity. "Look," Dante said, pointing to the city that stretched out before him. "Every building, every street, every square. Everything has a story to tell. But some stories have the power to change other stories." Isabel smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "And some stories never really end. They just turn into new beginnings." From the garden rose the cheerful voices of the guests, mixed with music and laughter. The gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, the same ones that had resisted during the years of abandonment of the mansion, patiently waiting for the moment to bloom again. "Do you know what I love most?" said Isabel, looking at the horizon. "How everything connects. Your story, my story, the story of this place. It's as if each piece has found its exact place in the most important project of all." "The project of life," Dante finished, gently kissing her forehead. At that moment, as the sun finished setting and the first stars began to dot the sky, they both knew they had built something much bigger than an urban renewal center. They had built a place where stories could begin again, where dreams could blossom, where love could transform not only hearts, but also walls, streets, and destinies. And so, between the mansion that had been reborn and the city that stretched out infinitely before them, Isabel and Dante began their own new beginning. A new beginning built, not only with bricks and mortar, but with hope, courage, and the certainty that sometimes you have to get completely lost in order to find your true way back home. A year had passed since the wedding, and the Urban Renewal Center had become much more than a social architecture project. It was now a model being replicated in different cities across the country. The house that Isabel had designed on the hill, with its panoramic library and generous balcony, served not only as a home for her and Dante, but also as a space of inspiration where new dreams were drawn up. On a special morning meeting, the auditorium at the center was packed. Representatives from 5 different cities had come to learn about the project and discuss its implementation in their respective regions. Isabel, now 6 months pregnant, led the presentation with the same passion as always. "The secret is not just in the architecture," she explained, gently stroking her belly as she walked across the stage. "It's in the way we integrate the space with the real needs of the community. Each center needs to have its own identity, its own story." Among those present was Carlo, who was now coordinating the expansion of the educational program. His transformation over the past year had surprised everyone. His former rival had become one of the most dedicated supporters of the project, especially after seeing the practical results in people's lives. "What began as an architectural restoration project," he added during his portion of the presentation, "has transformed into a human dignity restoration project." After the meeting, as visitors were touring the center, Isabel found Dante in his office. He was poring over blueprints and documents, but they weren't architectural plans. They were the papers of the new Vanek Foundation for Social Development. "How was the presentation?" he asked, standing up to hug her. "Amazing. 5 new cities." "Confirmed," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "But you know what touched me the most? Seeing how each representative came with their own ideas, with local stories they want to preserve and transform." Dante smiled, his hand joining hers on her belly. "Just like someone I knew who saw possibilities for transformation, even in a homeless person reading Le Corbusier." At that moment, they were interrupted by Marina, who rushed into the office. "You have to see this," she exclaimed, carrying a tablet. "The article about the center just came out in the International Architecture magazine." The article was long and complimentary, but what caught my attention most was the title, "Between Ruins and New Beginnings, the Silent Revolution of Social Architecture." The photos showed not only the original center, but also the pilot projects that were already beginning to develop in other cities. "Just look at this excerpt," Marina said, reading aloud. "What makes this project truly revolutionary is not just its innovative architectural solutions, but the way it proves that social transformation and historic preservation can and should go hand in hand. Each new center is not just a renovated building, but a community reborn." Isabel felt tears well up in her eyes, something that had happened more frequently since she became pregnant. "It's amazing how an idea can grow beyond ourselves," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Speaking of growing up," interrupted Mrs. Helena, who had just arrived for her weekly visit, "I brought something special for my granddaughter." She carried a carefully wrapped package. Inside was an old book, a first edition of Knowing How to See Architecture, the same title Isabel had lent to Dante that first morning in the mansion. "I found it at a second-hand bookstore," Mrs. Helena explained, her eyes shining. "So I thought it would be the perfect gift to start little Sophia's library." "Sophia?" Marina asked, surprised. "Have you chosen a name yet?" Dante and Isabel exchanged a knowing look. "Sophia means wisdom," he explained. It seemed appropriate for someone who will grow up among books and dreams of transformation. That afternoon, after everyone had left, Isabel was in her office reviewing the last details of the new projects when she found something interesting among the old documents in the mansion, a diary dated 1945, written by one of the first teachers who taught there. One passage in particular caught his attention. "The true purpose of education, like architecture, is not to build walls, but to tear down barriers. It is not to raise ceilings, but to elevate spirits. It is not to delimit spaces, but to expand horizons." Isabel smiled, thinking how those words, written so many decades ago, still echoed with such truth. She stroked her belly, feeling Sophia's gentle movements, and imagined what kind of world her daughter would find, a world that she hoped would be a little better thanks to the seeds of change they were planting. The sun was rising lazily over the city when Sophia came into the world. It was a spring morning, and the flowers in the garden of the Urban Renewal Center seemed to have bloomed especially to welcome her. From the maternity ward, Isabel could see in the distance the silhouette of the mansion that had changed her life. 3 months later, on a special afternoon, The whole family gathered on the terrace of the center for an intimate celebration. It was the day that the 1,000th student graduated from the professional courses, and also the day that the National Expansion Project would be officially announced. It's incredible to think how it all began, reflected Carlo, who was now not only Sophia's education coordinator, but also her godfather, with an unlikely encounter on a staircase. "Life is like that," replied Mrs. Helena, rocking her granddaughter as she looked out over the city below. "Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as coincidences." The graduation ceremony was moving. Jonas, the former homeless man who had become the chef at the school restaurant, was the class valedictorian. His speech, simple and sincere, touched everyone present. "When I came here," he said, his voice cracking, "I had nothing but broken dreams. Today I have not only regained my dreams, but I have learned to help others build theirs." After the ceremony, as the graduates celebrated with their families, Dante led everyone into a newly renovated area of the center. It was a wing, dedicated to memory and the future. "Welcome to Sophia Space," he announced, unveiling a sign at the entrance, a place where the stories of the past and the possibilities of the future meet. The walls of the space told, through photos and documents, the complete history of the mansion, from its early days as a teacher training center, through the period of abandonment until its transformation into an urban renewal center. On a special panel, the story of Dante and Isabel was told not as a fairy tale, but as an example of how personal and social transformation can go hand in hand. "And this," Dante continued, pointing to a large interactive digital map, "is the future. Each bright dot represents a new renewal center under development across the country." Isabel, with Sophia in her arms, watched in wonder as her small project had become a national movement. Each dot on the map represented not just a building being renovated, but lives being transformed, dreams being rebuilt. "But you know what's most special," she said, her soft voice choked with emotion, "is that each of these spots has its own story. Each city, each community is building its own path of transformation." At that moment, as if she understood the importance of the moment, little Sophia opened her eyes, so similar to her father's, and smiled her first smile. "See?" Dante joked, picking up his daughter. "She already knows she's part of something special." At the end of the afternoon, when everyone had already left, Isabel and Dante went up to the terrace one last time. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with the same colors as that afternoon, when he had revealed his true identity. "Sometimes I wonder," Isabel said, watching her daughter sleep in her father's arms, "if this is all real. If it's not just a dream from which I'll suddenly wake up, back on that morning on the stairs." Dante smiled, the same smile she had come to know from books on architecture and conversations about transformation. "If it is a dream," he replied, "it is a dream we built together, and now other people are helping us dream and build." From the garden rose the scent of wildflowers, the same ones that had endured through the years of neglect, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. In the city below, lights were beginning to come on, each one representing a story, a home, a possibility. "Do you know what moves me the most?" Isabel said, her voice barely above a whisper so as not to wake. "Sophia, it's that our story is no longer just ours. It belongs to everyone who believes that transformation is possible. And that sometimes," Dante added, "we need to lose ourselves completely to find not only our path, but also our mission." There, between the mansion that had been reborn and the sky that was tinged with stars, 3 generations of dreams met. The past represented by the history of the place, the present materialized in each transformed life, and the future symbolized by little Sophia, who would grow up learning that love and architecture can, together, build not only buildings, but bridges between people and possibilities. And so, as the night gently embraced the city, Isabel knew that some stories never truly end. They just turn into new beginnings, into new dreams, into new possibilities to build a better world. One brick, one heart, one life at a time.